Dave, I'm not sure. Do you want to give it a couple more minutes or?
Well, we have 33 or 25 attendees. What were you looking for? About twice that, weren't you?
Yeah, there were about 40 plus that were registered.
Give it a couple minutes and we'll get started. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this proposers conference. As hopefully most of you know by now, we are releasing our Success in School and Life and Early Learning and Development opportunity for response this year. This proposers conference is all about that release of request for proposal. So just a few housekeeping issues with how we're going to handle this call. You can see us, those of us that you can see from the council are panelists. All of you as attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions during the process. Put your questions into chat, if you will. We will have one of our staff monitoring our chat. And if the question is germane to the conversation, we can break in. You can also raise your hand if you have a question that pertains to whatever's being said at the moment. We will also have someone monitoring that. So hopefully that will work out. We won't have any issues with resolving those questions. I want to introduce certainly those on the call you that are part of the panel. You probably see. You may not know all of us. I do see some unfamiliar names in the attendees list, so I will take a moment to introduce everyone. I'm, of course, David Heaton with the Children's Services Council as the Executive Director. We've got Brandon Fabres on here from our Finance Department. We've got Edie on here from our front desk and reception staff. She's going to manage some of the, fortunately, she's very good at managing all the comings and goings of documents. So she's our go-to on that. Got Chanda Narkowitz, who's our manager of planning, evaluation, and community development. Zach Hackley, our director of finance. Nicole King, our contract specialist. Jennifer Carter is also on here. She's our fiscal specialist. And those not here joining us are certainly present in the building, but also available to you. Christine Georges, Stephanie Macera, Shari Ramirez, and Mary Rodriguez with our HIPPY program. There's a listing of our staff. If you're interested, all their contact information is there. We will share more on how to reach us during this process as we move along. Okay, next slide. We are assuming here that when you file your applications and send in your best effort, we need you to assume that this is a competitive process. Assume we don't know anything about you. You are presenting your best effort and explaining your program fully in a way that anyone who reads it can understand what you're asking for and what you need. We do have outside individuals from the community reviewing these applications along with us and scoring them. So they may not be as familiar with your programs as we are. So please keep that in mind as you are submitting your applications. This is a competitive process. So each of you, though you have, in some cases, received funding from us for many years, this puts you back into competition with anybody else out there who's looking to do similar projects. So please give it your best effort. The next slide is the timeline. Our timeline for this, we released this RFP last week. Today, of course, April 3rd is the proposers conference. These applications are due in our office by 5 o'clock on May 12th. If they're later than that, we have an option of not accepting them. So please keep in mind that date is a pretty hard deadline. So make your best effort to get it in beforehand, or certainly by that date at 5 o'clock. During June, July, we will be deliberating, reviewing applications with our community advisory panel and our staff, and we'll be reaching our decisions and presenting them to the Children's Services Council Board at their meeting on August 28th. So that's our time frame. We do have a contract year that begins in October. So any of you who are successful in this effort, you will be going to contract with us with your new program on October 1st. Again, I'll remind you, if you have questions, raise your hand. We will have somebody monitoring those questions and, if possible, answering them in the chat as in live time, in real time. So please don't be shy about asking questions or stopping us. This is a long process in that we go through the grants module. So I'm certain that you'll have some questions. So please raise your hand or ask those questions as they come up. Okay, Laura, you're up.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'll be showing you later on our program and funding policies, but our policy 1.1 shows all who's eligible to apply for funding. As Dave mentioned, this is a competitive process. You'll probably be hearing that throughout today's presentation. So anybody that is currently funded under this priority area, which is Success in School and Life, Early Learning and Development, you have already been notified that you must apply, as well as we have 2 programs that were in a different funding priority area that better align with this one. They've also been instructed to apply under this. But this is also open for any new programs that are not currently funded under this current priority area and would like to apply. Next slide, Edie. Okay, in our program and funding policies, as well as in our strategic plan, which I will show you how to access later, we have guiding principles. But 3 of our primary guiding principles that we wanted to bring up to all of you is that we are looking for programs that foster collaboration among provider agencies. We are looking for collective impact and programs that develop increasingly robust systems of care. Our funding decisions are informed by both qualitative and quantitative data. The RFP will reference all of that data and how to access it, and I will show you that later on in the presentation. And we are looking for programs, our funding preference for proven program models that are research proven or evidence-based, and Chanda will be speaking on that later. We are looking for programs that have positive impact and have sustainable, replicable outcomes. The website, our CSC website, is www.cscmc.org. I'm going to be navigating to that later on and just show you how to navigate to all of our resources. Next slide. On the website, we will have our program and funding policies, our chart of accounts, and a sample contract and budget under the funding info and application section. All of those documents were recently approved by our council at the March meeting. Those documents go into effect for the October 1st contract year. So for you programs that are currently already receiving funding for us, the existing contract and program funding policies and chart of accounts is still in effect until September 30th. As you go through the waiver or through the application process, if you need to request a waiver for any of our policies or for any of our contract requirements, there is a space for you to do that within the application itself or within the grants module. As Dave mentioned earlier, all of our applications are due by Friday, May 12th at 5 p.m. We actually built in some extra time this year into the timeline, so programs now have about 6 weeks to complete their application.
Hey, Laura.
Yes.
We have a question in the chat room. Pierce Tykes Teens is trying to log on, but they're having issues. It's saying they're already logged on. Is there anyone that can help with that?
Okay, let's see. I'm wondering if they have only the one account. Let's see. Let me see. Yeah, I think so too.
She thinks that's the issue. They only have one account.
Okay, so I think that's it because it's showing that it's logged in under Anne. So I'm not sure if you all are in the same space, if you can all maybe get together in one office. I think that's the challenge. Kim, are you able to join Anne?
Yes, we can send her the recording.
Okay. Okay. Just as a reminder that the due date is May 12th at 5 p.m. It is an online application. So once that time, once we hit 5 p.m. on the 12th, you will not be able to submit your application. And then on the online application, the applicant's duly authorized official, executive director or equivalent must certify that the information provided for funding is true and correct. And then once the application is submitted, no further application information will be accepted. Next slide. Oh, go back one. Let's see. I think slide 8. Okay, that's good. Okay, Nicole.
Okay, I'm up. All right, thank you all for joining us this morning. It's a super exciting priority area for me personally. I just was wanting to say a little bit more of the why CSC supports early learning and development. Most of you on the call all know, but just to reiterate, kindergarten readiness is that #1 benchmark to measure readiness to learn. And preparing children for kindergarten, which begins at birth, is influenced by those quality early learning experiences. We also know that children who enter kindergarten behind their peers stay behind. Early language skills are the foundation for reading ability and school readiness. We also know that children exposed to reading during their early years are more likely to learn to read on schedule. And lastly, access to high quality birth to 5 early learning programs generates significant short and long-term returns for both the individuals and our society. Again, I just wanted to point out the approaches that the CSC team took in determining the subcategories outlined before you for the RFP. The team accumulated much research grounded in the importance of early care and learning. We facilitated 7 community conversations with parents and early learning providers, as well as online surveys. We learned a lot from that experience. Families are not taking advantage of early learning opportunities for several reasons. Some of those reasons are there are no walkable pre-K options in certain pockets of our community. Trust can be an issue, but once parents do establish that trust, they have seen the value of importance connecting their children to early learning environments. Of course, the time of day becomes an issue. Parents don't want to leave their children, and families do not know clearly what is available in our community. We also learned that parents need to be educated as early as possible about child development and the importance of detecting those early signs of developmental delays. And of course, our early childhood providers know the importance of partnering with the families that they serve. We also acquired much quantitative data specific to the early care and learning environment in Martin County. So as you can see, there's two subcategories for this RFP: community-based outreach, intervention, and programming to support early learning and kindergarten readiness. And then the second opportunity is to support of birth to 5 developmental and unique learning needs, as well as behavioral and socio-emotional health. And so if you're an applicant, please remember to submit separate applications for either subcategory. Next slide. So you can see here with opportunity 1, we've broken that down. We're seeking culturally, developmentally appropriate strategies that are relevant to early learning and literacy outreach programming. So we want to see using evidence-based approaches and best practices that will reach children birth to 5 and their families in community-based settings. So that could be outreach in families in those everyday spaces like the pediatrician's office, the laundromats, libraries, and or through outreach via social media and messaging for an interactive content. Next slide, please. So under that category, we're seeking outreach initiatives to support the following outcomes. For this first funding priority opportunity, you are going to see our focus of importance of engaging the parents as their child's first teacher. Parents will receive information. This is what we're hoping for. Parents will receive information, tools, and resources to understand infant and child developmental growth, to support children's achievement of developmental milestones, including socio-emotional. We're hoping parents will receive information, tools, and resources to support infant and child early learning and to create an environment that offers support of foundational literacy and numeracy skill building. As well, we're hoping that parents will receive information, tools, and resources and or achieve a level of understanding of child development, healthy, responsive parenting practices, and appropriate behavior management. Please review the RFP on page 5. Chanda put a lot of effort into providing the reader with research links and information that will support your proposal. And you'll also notice in the application under program goals, these outcomes are reiterated, and Laura will be going over that in the application to point that out. Next slide, please. With the continuation of the outcomes we're looking for under subcategory 1, parents will receive information, tools, and resources that support children's ready to learn skills prior to kindergarten transition. And parents will enroll their children into early care programming that promotes school readiness skills, including home instructional, early child care center-based or pre-kindergarten school-based. And of course, there's always other. We're looking at how you will measure these outreach initiatives you are proposing. So are they research-based, evidence-based, or research-proven? Next slide. The second opportunity, we're looking for proposals that will support students with unique learning needs, as well as the behavioral and socio-emotional health of children birth to 5. So we're hoping that children will receive screening assessments and or developmental evaluations for early and ongoing identification of concerns. We're also hoping to see children will receive gains in their developmental skills and/or display new skills behaviors as demonstrated via mastery of appropriate sequential milestones. We're hoping children will improve their level of functioning and achieve target goals per treatment or intervention plans. We're also hoping children will demonstrate gains in age-appropriate competency skills as related to kindergarten readiness. Next slide. A continuation of unique learning needs and behavioral and social emotional health is that we're hoping children will achieve and maintain stability and continuity of care in their early care and educational setting. That parents will also receive information, tools, and resources and/or achieve a level of understanding of child development, evidence-based parenting practices, and appropriate behavior management. As well as parents will demonstrate an understanding, knowledge of, and/or increase their competency in the use of developmentally appropriate activities in support of their child's developmental needs, and that families will benefit from knowledge of the availability and assistance in accessing services and appropriate accommodations for the highest quality of care and intervention to promote their child's educational path. And of course, there's always other. Next slide. I believe that's our guru for program evaluation, interventions, and curricula.
Okay, good morning. This is Chanda, and I'm happy to cover this issues of measurement and performance measures with you. So the first slide, interventions and curricula. I'm going to take the approach of tips and hints and being very clear about what we're expecting in responses and what stronger responses might look like. So interventions and curricula, there's going to be a narrative question in the application asking for information on your proposed programs, primary interventions, and/or curricula with the following classifications. Some classifications differ. The proposers of different curriculum or researchers use different terminology. So this is our taxonomy, but if in your application you want to use their label, you're going to be asked to upload information specific to your interventions in curricula. And so you can either link it to this, or we can kind of figure it out based on what you upload and write in your narrative response. So research-based and science-based is where the most current research and practice knowledge guides your program design and its implementation, or science-based is based on a premise that's demonstrated in literature, often between experiences and biology, or environment and biology. We recommend that in your narrative answer for research-based, science-based, that you refer briefly to this foundational research or practice knowledge that's the basis of your interventions or curricula with that classification. Evidence-based, this seems to be where a lot of interventions and curriculum are housed. And basically this means that there's evidence of the effect of one thing upon another at some level or degree that's the result of your intervention or curriculum. And this effect is typically determined through outcome evaluation study. And for the purposes of your program design, this same effect is likely to be generated for your intervention or curriculum if implemented with fidelity and integrity. So for example, if the curriculum was tested with a certain effect on the post side, and it has 12 weekly sessions that were attended by the test population, 1 hour per session, we would expect to see that replication in your program proposal. And so in your narrative answer, we'd recommend that you refer to the effect that was outcome evaluated that supports the classification of your curriculum or intervention as evidence-based. Okay, research proven. I've added hypothesis because any of these classifications doesn't mean your whole program is, for example, evidence-based. It means that something that you're using as a curriculum or intervention is evidence-based. With research proven, this is a very complex quasi-experimental or experimental design that's sometimes used and sometimes attached to a particular intervention. And this is when a problem is identified, relevant data is gathered, are gathered, a hypothesis is formulated and empirically tested. And this rigorous study gets us as close as possible to a known fact that science can prove. So in your answer, if there's research available at this level that's aligned with your program's interventions, then in your narrative answer, please refer to the research at this level, to the hypothesis and the result of this empirical study. And then you'll be asked to either insert URLs within the narrative block and or upload any outcome evaluation and research that supports the classification of your intervention or curriculum. Next slide, please. Okay, measurement tools and methodology. There's going to be a question in the online application that's a narrative entry asking for a brief explanation and description of each measurement instrument or tool or measurement methodology that's going to be used. And what we want from that brief explanation is to indicate for each tool or each measurement method that you're going to use aligned with your program, that you briefly indicate what the target population is and what it's intended to measure, its test administration protocol, how often is it supposed to be administered? Is it pre-post? Is it pre-post-post, et cetera? The scoring methodology and the expected change or effect on the other side of the presentation of your curriculum or intervention. And so you'll be asked to indicate also what type of instrument it is and also to upload the instrument aligned with your performance measures and any pertinent research or information as to the use of the instrument. So it might be validated, standardized, normed, it might be a pre or post test or a post test or measure aligned with something that you want to collect data on or a particular curriculum. It might be a measure or indicator of progress supported by industry standards, or it might be a test or survey that's developed by the applicant organization, which is also referred to as homegrown. I specifically reference validated instruments here, again, along with hints and tips, because in prior applications, a lot of responses or several responses indicated that the pre-post tests aligned with evidence-based curricula were represented as validated. And that can be, we do have programs that we support that has an evidence-based intervention and evidence-based curriculum, and they add on a validated or standardized instrument to be part of the evaluation story of the program. But typically proposed or evidence-based curricula are classified as evidence-based because of outcome evaluation. And so that particular curriculum is not typically, the pre-post test that's associated with the curriculum is typically not validated, because validation is a very lengthy process that occurs amongst scientists, and it occurs over time. And then it shows you that that test instrument is valid. It measures what it was designed to measure, and with consistency or reliability over time. So again, you may have a validated instrument, but typically a curriculum it stays in the level of evidence based through an outcome evaluation. And instruments that are validated, standardized, normed, assessments, et cetera, they very clearly indicate themselves as such because, you know, it's a lengthy process and researchers are very proud of that status. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, there will also be a series of questions if you, when we get to the point of performance measures or PMs, we kind of refer to them as. So there will be an evaluation table that asks the same series of questions for each performance measure that you want to propose. And you would propose a performance measure when data is going to be collected for each individual participant. If you have some information you want to relay, data, measurement methodology that is not going to be based on performance measure where each individual participant has data entered into our data system, then there's going to be this year a different answer block for aggregate data collected for example, group participants. And also I want to stress that there is no required minimum number of performance measures to propose. So we would rather have two very strong, just saying two very strong performance measurements than more than that. Just, you know, more isn't necessarily better. So for each performance measurement you want to propose for your program based on the collection of data for each participant that's receiving a specific intervention or curriculum, the questions are going to ask you for the primary goal of the intervention, the projected length of participation of the population receiving the attached intervention. And we have a new feature in this year's online application to indicate if your proposed performance measure is continued, revised, deleted, or new. And this is because in the past, if you're a current provider and you're in this competitive process, sometimes there's two performance measures included in the application when the current contract may have 4. And it's difficult to determine if the exclusion of the performance measure was intentional or not. And so please indicate if you're presenting a new one, if this is a new program being proposed, and of course all of them would be new. If you're proposing a revised measure, I would recommend that you enter the revised language and upload a Word doc that explains what you're revising and why. And of course, if it's one you wish to propose to be deleted, the same thing, put in the current performance measure, indicate that you wish it to be deleted. And I would also recommend, just so that we are all clear, that you upload a Word doc that indicates why you're deleting it. And sometimes you might be deleting it and replacing it with a new one. And so that would be helpful if you indicate that in that uploaded Word doc. Also, the series of questions aligned with each performance measure is going to ask you what your intended participant population is. Is it persons of a certain age range? Is it a child or adult, etc.? And it's going to ask you what the total number of participants are that will be receiving the intervention or the curriculum that's attached to that proposed performance measurement. And then we also ask for a target percentage and meaningful improvement, and I'll touch upon that in a moment. And then it will ask you, there's a cell where you can upload the measurement instrument or the measurement methodology and when administered. You know, is it twice every 6 months, etc. Okay, so actually, when you develop a performance measure, there's two targets that comprise the measure. So it's of the total participants, of the total, the percentage or number that's expected to achieve the desired effect. And second, in the performance measure structure, the specific projected effect after the curriculum or an intervention is complete. And I've highlighted this because sometimes the answer that we get in the meaningful improvement part of that series of questions, which allows a little bit of narrative response, not a lot, but a little bit. It'll say a higher post score or a higher test score. And it would be stronger, if possible, if you can be more specific about that meaningful improvement. And so instead of saying 80% of the parents that completed ABC curriculum will have a higher post score, it's stronger to have the meaningful improvement reference with more specificity and say, for example, 80% of the parents that completed ABC curriculum will have a post score of X or higher. So sometimes the responses say any increase specifically directed, any increase on the post side. And that is okay if it's directed by the measurement instrument guidelines. For example, we have in our current repertoire some instruments that are validated, standardized, and they transfer results into a categorization of, for example, 1 through 6 or 1 through 10. So in that instance, it's meaningful improvement if that's directed by the measurement instrument guidelines to have possibly any increase, so that if it's a 1 to 6 tied to ongoing progress, rating system, then a movement from a 2 to a 3, for example, may actually be meaningful improvement. But if it's a 1 through 100 scoring of an evidence-based curriculum, then saying any increase infers that a pre-score of 20 and a post-score of 25 of 100 would be acceptable when we consider that performance measure. So in that instance, my tips in this is to always contact the developer, the evaluation team, the lead investigator that's associated with your interventions, your curriculum, and even your test instruments, because they often give you guidance about how the data and the effect can and should be represented. And I always do that and talk to them about, is this appropriate to translate the data or the results into a performance measure with individual participant data collection? And if so, what would be the recommended meaningful improvement? And sometimes they indicate that it wasn't tested for that. For example, one curriculum that I reached out to, the post score was an average score, the outcome evaluation for this particular curriculum, and the evidence-based status was based on the average post scores, the mean of all the post scores compared to the mean of all the matched pre-scores, and there was a 5% increase. But when asked, can we translate that outcome evaluation to individual participation, they said that that particular curriculum wasn't outcome tested or evaluated for that. Our goal is to, try to replicate what's actually been done to evaluate an intervention or outcome. We don't want to force it in an unintended direction. So I like it when you, can reach out and have these conversations with the evaluation team of a curriculum or the author of a particular intervention or instrument. Okay. My tip also is when you generate the performance measurement specific to, for example, an outcome evaluated effect, that you stay within the behavior or the effect that was outcome evaluated. So for example, if you present information in a curriculum and there's information gain on the post side that was the outcome evaluation that's available for that particular instrument, then we would want the performance measure to be specific to that evaluated effect. So if it's knowledge gain on the post side, even though we would wish, aspirationally, that would lead to attitudinal change or behavior change, the performance measure, we would prefer that you contain that to the studied effect. And there, if you want to look at attitudinal change or behavior change, if that's not available in that particular curriculum or evaluated effect, then you might want to look at a different curriculum. Okay, and the other thing is, as a tip, some research-based or some curriculum or interventions do not have a pre-post test accompanying it. And so we would recommend that you not make up a pre-post test, because we would not know, how to evaluate that in fairness and accuracy. We wouldn't know what meaningful improvement would be without any evaluation data. And if you have a curriculum that you wish to present to a population, because it's very, important information to relay, you can always represent the effects or represent that strategy in terms of aggregate data or process evaluation. How many parents attended, if it's parent meetings, and how many completed the curriculum. And that's okay, because we'd rather have that than, again, changing it. And sometimes, lastly, some instruments, some curricula have embedded what I call skills tests in them. So as you go, is your audience understanding a certain point? But that isn't, if it's not been tested as a pre-post instrument, those questions, and we don't want those questions turned into a pre-post test. Okay, so thank you so much. And if you have questions along the way when you're completing your application, there is on every page of the online application an opportunity under Ask a Question to forward us something. So if you're stuck, don't be stuck, reach out and we'll provide that help. And if it's we can publish that Q&A, and we can hide details of the person or organization requesting the information, because if it's important, it might help the whole application pool to have that question and answer published, then we can do that. So thank you so much, and we look forward to your applications.
Thank you, Chana, for all that information. Good morning. I'm Zach Hackley. I'm the Director of Finance. I'm gonna go over a few housekeeping things as it relates to your budget and staffing table. Remember to fill in the budget narrative for all revenue and expenditure accounts that have activity. Be specific, but not too specific. Keep in mind, act as if we know we have no idea who you are or what you do. Make sure the staffing table ties to the total program budget. We want all program staff to be listed on the staffing table, and all administrative staff to be listed down below in another GL account called administrative costs. Sometimes you'll have individuals that belong in both. So when you have that, just put the proper percentages up above in the staffing table under programs, and then the other percentage down under administrative. We're also going to need a few supporting documents. We need a list of your current board of directors, your IRS 990, your audited financial statements and associated management letter if received, job descriptions of all proposed positions regardless of funder, and your program budget for Martin County only. So if you have a program that does services for multiple counties, just provide your program budget for Martin County only. Thank you.
Okay, I will be demonstrating how to access the online application. But first, I just want to point out that Google Chrome is the best browser. So if you have access to Google Chrome, we recommend that you complete your application under that browser. And Chanda mentioned earlier about asking questions. There is the ability to ask questions within the online application. Next slide, please. Starting your application. For those of you that are currently funded by CSC, your agency should already be listed, but if you're a new applicant or a new provider that is requesting funding at this time or applying for funding at this time, you'll see here that there's a way once you're in the online application to click that your agency is not listed. You will be required to submit your SunBiz number as well as your agency information. As you see here, any asterisk is required information. Once you do that, you will be given permission to apply. And then under the application section, when you are completing, or actually when you're starting your application, you'll see here that there's a screen that will ask for the title of your application. Please be very careful. This is one area in the application process that you cannot change. So please try to name your program or what you will be applying for at the very beginning. The title of, if you put here like placeholder or TBD, that is what it's going to stay as in the process. So try and be thoughtful about your program name prior to completing your pre-application. Also in the application, you are able to submit authorized users. So this is anybody that you want to have access to completing the application. You can add more as you go throughout the process, but if you have a pretty good idea of who will be working on this application, including your finance people, any grant writers, you can add their names and email here. And then also, once you start the application, you will be asked a series of questions to make sure that you're eligible for funding. So please make sure that you read the questions carefully and answer them appropriately. And once you do, that is also another screening. It will allow you to complete the application or to fill out the application. If you answer one of these questions incorrectly, you will not be able to proceed further. So you would need to reach out to us and let us know, and we would have to be able to reset the questions for you. So just be careful when you're completing that. And I think actually at this time, I asked Edie, if you could stop sharing your screen. I am going to do some navigation here just to walk through the online application. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the best way to access the application in the beginning is actually to navigate to our cscmc.org website. And once you're on the website, you'll see at the third tab over is funding information. I mentioned the strategic plan earlier. There's a lot of helpful information under this funding information category. The strategic plan is located here, some additional resources for our current providers, but right here under application and funding information is where you will want to go to access the application initially. And you'll see here that we're now accepting proposals for success in school and life, early learning and development, birth to 5. Before I click here, this is where you will actually go into apply. But here are all of the supporting documents that we've referenced throughout this presentation, including the actual request for proposal document. And when you click on here, you will see the RFP, a lot of useful information, funding eligibility, the timeline that we referenced earlier, and all of the language that Nicole was mentioning earlier, and all of the qualitative data as well as the quantitative data that's been referenced in this application. So please read this document, read it thoroughly. There's a lot of useful links. You can see down here also all of the data, the quantitative data that has gone into this document to help you with your application. And then I also mentioned our program and funding policies that were approved in March that are effective October 1st, 2023, our chart of accounts, and our sample contract and budget. For those of you that are currently funded, please be sure to look at the program and funding policies that are effective October 1st. There has been a lot of changes, especially around the insurance requirements. Okay, let me go ahead and click apply here to get into the actual grants module. For those of you who have been funded through CSC for a while, we refer to this as SAMUS, but we are now actually calling this the Hub Martin. So similar to St. Lucie County. It hasn't changed. The database hasn't changed. We're just calling it a different name. And again, here's more information where we're accepting proposals under. And if you scroll all the way down, you will see a blue button here to start a new application. This is where you will go in to start your application, and I believe Nicole mentioned that you would need to submit, if you have more than one program you are proposing, you would need to start a new application for each program that you are proposing. The timeline has already been discussed. May 12th is the due date at 5 p.m. You are able to submit questions in this module. The deadline to submit questions is 4:30 on the 12th. That just gives us time, 30 minutes to respond to any questions before the final due date. And then the August 28th selection announcement is actually, we go to council on that date, and then we will let the providers know after the council meeting. At any point that you want to ask a question, here's where you would ask that. I'm not going to do that right now, but this will generate a question, and then we will respond to your question. Again, these are all of the links that I mentioned on our website, but you can click through these at any time and it will take you back to those links. You can also, as I scroll up to the top, also see that you can ask a question up here or start a new application. So there's a couple of ways to do things in SAMUS or in the hub. This is another place where you can do that. I also want to point out that next to the due date, we actually have a counter. So at this point, there's 39 days and 6 hours, 6 minutes remaining. So this, you will be able to see each time that you go in to work on your application. I have already started an application. Just to show you, when you do go in each time, once you've set up your initial application, you can go in and click it at that location. And each time you go in, you're actually going to be able to view it. Anytime you would want to make a change, you actually have to click over to the modify with the pencil button. So just keep that in mind. You can also do a printer-friendly version for those of you who like to look at all of the questions beforehand or like to print out the document. You can do that through the printer-friendly version, or just through the view application feature. You can actually scroll down and read all of the questions throughout before you actually start filling out the application. Going to hit as you can see on this section, it will actually show you how far you've, how much you have completed. For any section that has a green check, that's been completed. Any section that has a red X, that means that still needs to be worked on. The only way that you'll be able to submit your application, and when all of these turn to green checks, and at the very end, there will be a submit application button. Just want to show you the modify button. Once you hit the modify button, you will see that you're actually in an area where you can edit the fields. And in each section, you'll see a checkbox here where you would mark the section complete. And so I've done a few of these already. But once you've hit the green button and you've decided, hey, I made a mistake, I actually want to go back in and modify, you can unclick your button and it's no longer checked. So you can make changes once you've hit the green button. I did want to point that out. And also you can have, if you've authorized more than one user, you can have different people working on the application at the same time. So if you have your finance people working on the budget and staffing table, your program directors can be working on the program summary. This can all be happening at the same time. The only thing that the system really doesn't allow is for two people to be working on the same section at the same time. So be careful when you do that. If you do happen to be in the same section, you would see somebody else's name appear. So if I'm on this section completing it and Nicole is also on this section, there will be a notification that says that Nicole is also on this section. So there is kind of a fail safe in place for that. And in each section, as you start to complete it, you'll see that we've added instructions. We've been very clear of some of the directions or some of the instructions that we would like you to add. And in some places, we've actually given more direction. So if you're filling out the program activity section and you click on the new entry, you'll see that we've added little tips. That's what the little eyes mean. If we're asking for something and you're unclear, if you just hover over the tip, it will tell you exactly what it is that we're looking for. And we've done that throughout the document. One thing that I do want to point out in the very beginning is under the program summary. You'll see here that this is asking for the CSC award. If you're currently funded, if you're not funding, you would put 0. If your program's not funding, you would put 0. And also the total request of what you're requesting in this application. If you're currently funded and you're requesting more money, we do ask for you to be very specific, add a bulleted list of what it is that the request would cover, what you're looking for. One of the things that we've noticed in previous applications is that this section and the budget table, they're supposed to tie together. The amount you're requesting in your budget table at the end, this total dollar amount should tie into the program summary of your total request. So just be sure to make sure you're matching the total budget request with the program summary current request before you submit your application. In the supporting documents section, anywhere throughout the document, actually, you'll see asterisks. If there is an asterisk, that is a required field. You'll be required. In this case, Zach had mentioned our supporting documents that are required. You cannot move on until you've uploaded the documents that are required. So even if you were to try and save and continue later, oops, made a mistake. Hold on a second. Actually, that might be a bad example. Sorry, I'm looking for here. If you are required to do an upload and you try and save an entry, the system will not allow you to continue until all of that information is complete. So make sure you have all of your uploads available before you try and hit save. When you upload a document, we do request that you try and name them something that's easy identified by the staff that's reviewing the document. So if you have a job description for a program manager, please list it as the program manager job description. Please be very clear in what you label your documents so that staff can understand it as we're reviewing. If you hit cancel, none of the information that you've entered has been saved. The supporting document section is also the area where you're if you have to have a waiver request, if you've read the program and funding policy section or our sample contract and budget, and if there's something that is not a policy that you cannot meet or a contractual requirement that you cannot meet, this is where you would upload that waiver request. This is not a required field because many of you can meet all of our requirements, but for whatever reason, if you can't, this is where you would request that. And then CSC staff would have to evaluate that. And sometimes we do have to go to council for approval to waive that requirement. I'm not sure. I think that is all I really wanted to demonstrate. again, if you wanted to hit save and continue later, your document will take you back to the view application section. Anytime that you want to make changes, you would hit the modify button. The one thing I do want to show is Chanda was mentioning her with the measurements, performance measurements. You would hit a new entry. This is where she was talking about the new, revised, continued, or deleted. Please, when you add your performance measurements, if this is something that is currently funded, be sure to go to your contract. If you're currently funded with us, be sure to go to your existing contract, your most current contract, and use those performance measures. Do not go back to your submission from several years ago or what you proposed to us. We would like to see what performance measures have actually gone into your contract in this current contract year. We've noticed that in the past, people copy and paste from old applications, and a lot of times they're proposing measures that aren't even in existing contracts. Chanda, do you want to add anything more to this section, or is that?
No, thank you. I think it's good.
Okay. I think that's all for navigating. Are there any questions with regarding the navigation of the system itself? Okay. And then Edie, can you please put the PowerPoint back there? Okay, just I know Chanda had mentioned several hints and tips throughout the performance measurements. This is also some additional tips that please read the entire request for proposal RFP document and the links that Nicole and Chanda both mentioned in their presentation. There's a lot of research that have gone into the shaping of this RFP. So please take the time to look through all of that information. The qualitative and quantitative data that help shape the RFP is also located in that document. I demonstrated the charts at the end. So there's a lot of quantitative data that you can look at. Please do not assume that we know your program. Dave mentioned in the very beginning of the presentation that in addition to CSC staff, we do have a CAP or Citizens Advisory Team that will be reviewing this. Many of them do not know your program, so assume when you're writing it that we are learning about your program for the first time. And please do not copy and paste from previous years. We want to see how your program has evolved over time if it is currently funded. So please, anybody that's currently funded, please make sure that you start fresh and let us know how the program has evolved over time. Chanda discussed the performance measurement section at length. Again, an individual performance measurement is something that will be tied to our database system, but we do allow space this year for you to propose any aggregate information, aggregate data, or process measures in a separate section. The sorting of the budget line items in the budget table itself, there is a feature once you enter the individual charts or individual line items that you can actually sort your document so that it is in numerical order, because each line item has a different number representing it. I mentioned the waiver requests. Those are due at the time of application, and the due date is May 12th at 5 p.m. And then the last slide is we do intend to have the recording also as a resource under our website, under the application and funding information. It may take us a little while to get that uploaded within the next day or so, though we do hope to have that uploaded. And at this time, I would like to end the PowerPoint presentation and open it up for any questions. Do we have any questions?
Lori, did you mention that there's an extended period of time between the release of the RFP and the due date, and it's longer than the typical time frame.
I did, but that's a good reminder that we actually extended it by an additional 2.5 weeks, I think, this year compared to other years. So there's almost 6 weeks available, or maybe even a little bit more than 6 weeks available for you to apply. We wanted to give you all extra time to go through all of the research and the links and the data and give you ample time to propose a program. And I do see that there was one question about the PowerPoint, and yes, we can get the PowerPoint also up on the CSC website along with the video of today's recording. A question came up in terms of, do we need to send in an LOI? No, you do not. This is a competitive process, so anybody is eligible to apply under this. So you would just go through the steps that I mentioned by accessing the application on the CSC website.
Laura, do we still have specific email addresses to address questions with regard to this? We had a program one and a fiscal one, or are we just doing that individually?
We do have those set up, but we found to just keep the question and answers in the module itself made more sense. So if somebody had a specific question, they could go into the solicitation section of the module and ask those questions there. That way it would benefit everybody. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if you do have any challenges as you start your application process, please don't hesitate to reach out to us for assistance. But in the meantime, just remember that your due date is May 12th at 5 p.m. and we look forward to receiving your application.